Here's the recipe to blow up. Number one, analyze the new channel, figure out what works. So that's step one. Step two is spend your weekends writing down your ideas rather than spending time with your friends and your family. Step three is...
We've got some very special guests on the show today. The first guest is Ethan Smith. He's the founder and CEO of Graphite, a San Francisco-based growth and SEO agency that helps companies like Notion, Webflow, and Rippling.
You hear that people are using ChatGPT instead of Google. Not true. AI overviews is killing click-through rate. Not really true. You're hearing that other sites are going way down. Also mostly not true.
We're also joined by Rahul Jain, the CEO and co-founder of Noble. Noble is paid placement for AI search.
The future of search will be an experience where, yes, people will always visit websites to a certain extent, but I think that human traffic is going to decrease significantly.
Anybody that was saying SEO is dead is a complete moron.
If you want to win the most popular questions, you need to optimize.
Hey everybody, it's Sam Jacobs. Welcome to Topline. I'm the CEO Pavilion. I'm joined by my co-hosts, Asad Zaman, the CEO of Sales Talent Agency, and AJ Bruno, the CEO of QuotaPath. And we've got some very special guests on the show today. The first guest is Ethan Smith. He's the founder and CEO of Graphite. He's known for his direction plus speed equals velocity philosophy. Ethan has become one of the leading voices redefining how modern companies approach search and content. We're also joined by my friend, Rahul Jain, the CEO and co-founder of Noble. Noble automates the outreach, negotiation, and payment to place you in the sources that LLMs cite. So you show up in the answers your prospects read. Prior to starting Noble, Rahul led sales at multiple growth stage startups. And if you haven't figured it out, today we are going to be talking about the transition from SEO to AEO, Agentic Engine Optimization. What's working, what's not working, how we need to think about it, and how companies should prepare for a world dominated by AI agents scouring the internet. Gentlemen, start your engines.
Let's go.
All right. Asad, kick us off on our new segment that you like to call
Quiz Pro Quo. So guys, these are we actually need something
You're
like
joking about this. I didn't know it was
that.
real.
No, this is it. So
This is quite real.
this is quite real. 4 MCQ questions, one for each of you, and it's going to frame our conversation and test your knowledge. To give you guys a flavor of what this is, we're going to start with AJ.
Oh,
AJ.
man. By the way, just so you guys know, I went 0 for 3 last week. There is a scoreboard. We do keep track of this, and winners get all of the
AJ is
points.
very
I
much
believe
at the
I'm
bottom.
I was 3-0 last week. I
Yeah.
believe I was flawless.
Let's hear it, Austin. I got this.
The number of websites on the World Wide Web. Your options are 800,000, a billion, 2 billion.
These numbers are ridiculous, by the way. Also, there was 738,000 companies we talked about last week, so I'm definitely not going with 800,000.
Smart.
You're the middle answer, so just kick us off. A billion, final answer.
You are right. Do you think that's... I always do this because I'm the middle child, so I like put the right one in the middle. This is something to do with that. I don't know, but that is correct. Now, Rahul, what percent of these 1.1 billion websites do you think are considered active websites? The options are 5%, 27%, 18%, or 47%.
I think it's probably very low. So I would actually guess 5%.
You were right about the direction of your answer. It's 18%. Tell us why, quickly tell us why you think it's so
Also,
low.
Austin is being very nice to our guests when he gets them wrong. We don't get the same treatment,
I
Rahul.
think he's nice generally. I'll say that.
Why did you think it was low?
Because I think it's very hard to maintain a website. I think most people don't do it. I think they also just throw something up on the site and then they are not going back to it. I also don't know if a lot of these websites are just created as bots and it's not actually maintained for humans to view. So those are my thoughts.
There we go. That's why we have the experts here. I would not have guessed that. Sam, what is the most recent monthly average for visits to google.com globally in 2025? 77 billion, 101 billion, 124 billion, or 10 billion?
124 billion.
Why?
Why?
It's a very large. Give us your math, Sam. Go.
It's 101 billion. There are 101 billion monthly average visits. To
Wait,
Google.
did you have a choice that was 101 billion and 124 billion?
Yes.
That's really lame. That's really weird.
We also gave you 4 choices, Sam, by the
I know.
way. We've all
Okay.
been getting 3, and you were
This
like,
is-
I'm
the point
perfect.
is-
Look at me.
What do we think? There's 8 billion people in the world. Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah. A billion
So
websites.
What does that mean? That means each person on Earth goes to Google 12 to 13 times a month. That's pretty crazy.
Is that going up or down right now? I'm curious.
Ethan can answer that question.
Oh, we got the last question here.
Yeah, I actually have data on that. How many did you say for Google?
101.
101? I think it's 283 actually, because
Well
actually
then,
I'm writing
Leonard,
an
we're going
article
to be having
right
a conversation.
Yeah, with real
Why
data.
people
So,
stop?
yeah, I think
Should
it's
reach.
283 billion, and it's not going down. It's quote down by 1% if you look at 2025 versus 2024 and 2023, which is very little. So it's essentially not going down. It's flat. And then if you look at AI mode and Gemini, then it becomes larger. Please.
May I ask a follow-up? What percent of Google searches in recent times result in no clicks to any website? And how has that changed over like the last 2 or 3 years?
I don't know, but I'm finding that out as we speak. What I'll say is that there's a chart that Ahrefs put out where it shows the growth of AI overviews and then the featured snippets. And so essentially, roughly 27% of the time there's an AI overview, and 73% of the time there's not, according to Ahrefs. And then before that, 20% of the time there was a featured snippet. So it went from 20% of the time with a big thing up top pushing down organic to 27% of the time. So, an absolute increase of 7%. But it's not like all of a sudden there's this big module at the top pushing down the blue links, and the blue links were there right before that. So I think it's more gradual. Also, there's some data suggesting that the amount of searches per user has actually increased over time. So flat Google, more searches, slightly lower click-through rate, roughly net effect is flatness.
Would it also be fair to say that when you had the featured snippets, that there was a higher likelihood to then have to go and click in and get more information from there versus these AI answers are just that much better, that much more robust, and would reduce the need to go further and click in?
I don't know. My opinion is that they were equally good because a featured snippet is essentially a verbatim copy and paste from a part of a page. And the AI overview is a summary of multiple pages. Whether that the AI summary of several versus the exact match of one is better, I don't think so. Maybe, I'm not sure, but I'm suspicious about. I found the featured snippets quite useful.
Ethan, we've asked you 10 follow-up questions. None of them are Asid's quiz pro quote so far, right? Asid, you still have a question to ask.
I actually have a question for Ethan that's going to lay up us jumping into the docket. Ethan, and this, you might know this better than Leonard as well, but let's see. What is the projected global value of the SEO services market in 2025? 56 billion, 3 billion, 200 billion, or $106 billion?
This is US?
Global.
Global. So it's 50, 100, 200, roughly?
Yeah.
And 3. Depends on if you include content marketing and how broad you go. I would probably say 50 billion.
It is twice that. It's $106 billion. It's the world in which you play. It's a world that is going through a lot of change right now. We had SEO that was the way companies would organically show up in Google search and was a major driver of traffic, and hence such a large industry globally supporting companies to be able to figure that out. And then with AI, as with most things, there's just a lot up in the air now. You've got behavior of users that's changed towards going further to find answers, and there's new places they're going to find those answers. For a while, Google was how you searched for things. Now, some of us are going to ChatGPT, others are using Google, some like the AI snippets on Google, others prefer to use ChatGPT directly through the browser. So there's a lot of change that's happening. And so maybe the place to start, Ethan, would be give us a 10,000 foot view on the old world versus the new world. What was pre-AI? What was SEO? How did you optimize for it? And what's different now? And what's the same?
I'll take an even longer perspective. So what was search and SEO like in the 2000s? In the 2000s, you had programmatic SEO. And this is where you had a search and most of the results were exact match. And that's because the algorithm couldn't understand the semantic understanding of the page. So programmatic SEO is where you would create millions of auto-generated exact match landing pages. And you needed to have them be auto-generated because you can't create 20 million, articles. That would cost too much. And how I got started was this, which is gathering millions or tens of millions of search queries and then creating auto-generated pages for them. That was programmatic SEO. And then Google introduced a series of semantic understanding, keyword grouping, and then down-weighting programmatic landing pages and favoring editorial pages. So then you had editorial SEO. That started in about 2011. And then you've had these new surfaces emerge. You had social media, you had YouTube, Amazon, TikTok, Instagram, all these new channels better fulfill certain kinds of intent. Like Instagram is probably a better way to plan traveling, and TikTok might be a better way to plan traveling in a restaurant than Google. And so a lot of people use Instagram and TikTok instead of Google. And then now you have AI. So AI, I think of this as yet another search and discovery platform. And it's better at fulfilling some intents. Like it's really good at summarization. It's very good at specific questions. Like I want a product with all these attributes and these features and this integration. It's very good at that. It's better than search. Search is better at other things. Search is built for quick answers to questions. Sometimes people want that. And so I think of LLMs as another search and discovery platform, just like TikTok, Instagram. So what's the difference? So basically everything in SEO works for free in LLMs. The stuff that's different is the head and the tail. So the head is if you want to win the most popular questions, you need to optimize for offsite. If your URL is the number one URL in the citations, you will not win. You need other URLs to mention you. So the head and offsite marketing is the largest difference. The second difference is the tail. People ask very specific questions. The tail is larger and longer in chat than in search. And there are questions that have never been searched before. So you need to be able to answer those. But SEO, everything works for free. The differences are the head and the tail.
Would you say that another fundamental difference is that if you were an organization, let's say you were earlier on in your life cycle and you hadn't raised a boatload of money, you were trying to be cost effective in how you went forward. SEO required a heavy investment, especially if you are in a competitive, saturated space. But a way to compete was that you could run ads that sit on top of the blue links. And so any company could be literally the first thing that shows up if they spent for it through a paid ad, or they would do SEO to grow from number 10 to 9 to 8 to 7 over time. And then they would get this placement that over time was far more cost effective. There's not an equivalent of paying to be at the top with AI right now. So would you agree that this is a fundamental difference?
Not having ads is a fundamental difference. Although I think ads will come. We'll see what they look like. My suspicion is that they'll look like Quora and Reddit ads, where you have a sponsored post or a sponsored answer in Quora, and then you boost that, and you would have a sponsored answer within ChatGPT. But we don't know yet. So a key difference is there are no ads. Probably eventually ads. The other key difference is the speed part, which you mentioned. And to rank in Google, it takes a very long time because you need to build authority. And then to rank in LLMs, it can be faster. And it can be faster because of the head and the tail that I mentioned. So if you answer a question that no one's ever answered before, you could show up quickly for that without a lot of domain authority. And then the second thing is offsite. If you want to be the best credit card and you launch a credit card tomorrow and 10 of the citations in the LLMs are mentioning you because you paid them or because you made a YouTube video or like you somehow showed up in the citations, you can be the best credit card tomorrow. And that's not the case in search. So that's another key difference.
Rahul, this is the world in which you operate to some extent, right? Give us the 10,000 foot view of how this plays out from the lens that you look at it, because it feels like there's a lot of alpha to be generated by showing up in the right places. There's these, if let's use Financial Times or Wall Street Journal, you get mentioned there the right way, there's a lot of value to that. But then that seems like for a while, PR had lost its fanciness, its usefulness. Companies didn't prioritize it the same way. Are we saying that in this AI world, traditional PR is big again? Getting into Wall Street Journal is big again? And how are those publications receiving this, I would imagine, increased outreach from the types of organizations you guys help?
Yeah. They say PR is back when it comes to AI search. But what's interesting is it's not the
AJ,
typical.
you left the space too early.
I literally sitting here saying like I sold my company PR and a PR analytics company wildly too early for this. Hearing PR is back is just hilarious to me. But please, I agree, Rahul. But go ahead.
Yeah, the one caveat of that is it's not the tier one publishers that we see cited, it's the long tail publishers. So Ethan was kind of mentioning this, where we don't see a lot of citations from the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, Forbes, Fortune, kind of those historical like tier one publishers. It's more blogs and listicles and kind of these long tail articles that are getting cited by the LLMs. So to Ethan's point, it's incredibly important to get cited and to get mentioned in these citations, because ultimately all these LLMs are doing is they're finding sources that they think are answering the prospect's question. And if your brand is not being mentioned in those sources, it's not going to show up in the answer. So
how good is it at picking the right sources? Because I don't know about you guys, but I work with somebody on SEO who's obviously not as good as Ethan is, but sometimes when they send me these articles that are going to be published in some other place that's going to help our SEO ranking, and it does, SEO drives 20% of my business, you read the names of those websites and you're like, what is this? Who's going to it? Why does this work? And then you're saying that right now there are these other sites other than the Wall Street Journals and the Informations and all of these that are getting a lot of value. Are these better places than what was given some value in the SEO world, or are we kind of trending in the same direction?
I don't know. I don't have an answer to that. I'll say that like these sources do seem somewhat random, but I do think that they are probably the closest to answering that prospect's questions. Because if you're asking about, sales commission software, or if you're asking about specific products, there might not be an information in Forbes or Fortune or the New York Times or Wall Street Journal about that specific question that you have. The other thing that we're seeing is that a lot of these tier one publishers, they're trying to block the crawlers. So that's something that's also happening. I know Cloudflare has been really public about this, where unless you're like the New York Times and you have like the money to sue OpenAI and actually get them to pay you for access to the content, a lot of these publishers are also blocking the crawlers. They're doing their best.
This is 2008 all over again. In 2008, most European countries, there was one specific, I think it was Ireland actually, that blocked Google, or maybe it might have been actually the UK that blocked Google from crawling it. And at the time I worked for a company called Meltwater, and we were part of the lawsuit with the Associated Press that was suing us for crawlers. And it's this whole paywall and pay premium for PR has been really interesting over the decades to follow, really what was a dying industry for the last 2 decades with PR. But the question I have, Rahul, is do the sources vary from industry to industry? You mentioned sales commission. So if they do, how do we find, if we're in that industry, how do we figure out what are the trusted sources that the LLMs are looking at?
Yeah, for every search, the sources will be listed. So you'll see it's like that hyperlink icon, you click on it, and then you'll actually see what sources the LLMs are pulling this information from. So it's actually, pretty easy if you're just curious and you type into either Google or ChatGPT, like what is the best, sales commission software? And then you see what comes up there. So you can see what the sources are. The sources do change often. They change, every few weeks for the same search prompt. And the sources that are pulled also vary based off like geography. So if I'm searching here at San Francisco and, AJ, if you're in Philly, the sources that are pulled based off geography will also change. That being said, we're so early, I think, in this transition that I'm sure that the sources over time will change. But it kind of goes back to this idea that the way that these LLMs work is that they're looking for snippets that answer the prospect's question. And if you're not in the source, then there's just no chance that you show up in the answer.
What I'm hearing Rahul say is that authority around, the publisher is less important right now than, matching on the specific question. The ability to answer the specific question is more important than authority. And so that means that a bunch of unknown websites, if you get them to publish a common question about your product, Like you get them to write an article or suggest that they write an article that is a framing of a commonly asked question about your product. That might matter more than, to Asid's point, getting a high authority publisher to write a review of your product or cite something about what you do. Is that accurate? And if so, is that, to Rahul's point, is that going to last? Because I can imagine that the LLMs will say, okay, well, we need to increase the degree of sophistication here, and we actually need to cross-reference the quality of the answer plus the authority of the publisher. What do you think?
So it depends on how specific the question is. If you ask a question and no one other than you has answered it, then you're going to show up because no one else has answered it. And if Forbes has answered it, then Forbes is going to show up because Forbes has more authority. The thing is that there are many questions that have few answers. And similar with long tail SEO, there are many search queries with no exact match URLs. So if you're the only exact match URL, then you would show up in the programmatic SEO days. And so the same is true for long tail questions. If you are the only answer for a question, you're going to show up. But for popular questions, there's many people who have answered that. And so then you have an authority algorithm, just like you have with Google. The other question was about the quality of the domains, I think you were mentioning. My personal opinion is if you look at the top domains on Google and in ChatGPT, they're frequently not that great. They're these sort of mediocre affiliate rewriting each other's content type sites. So my personal opinion is that they're not that great. Will they become better? I hope so, but I think that's the current problem with search is you have these, I rewrote your article and you rewrote somebody else's article and we're all rewriting each other's content. It's all kind of mediocre rewritten regurgitations of each other's content. I'm seeing fairly noisy stuff in LLMs as well. Also, LLMs are early in building their search algorithm. Google has been building their search algorithm for, I think, almost 25 years. It's hard to build a search algorithm, especially the authority piece of the algorithm. The relevance is easier. The authority piece is very hard. And so I think that all the LLMs are early in their authority algorithm. And so probably the domains that are getting cited are going to be a bit noisier now, and then they'll increase in quality over time. But even Google, I don't think, does an amazing job at selecting truly authoritative websites.
Is it a good strategy to, I mean, maybe Rahul, is this what Noble is doing? Is it a good strategy to ask a series of questions that a customer might have about your product in ChatGPT or in Claude or whatever, figure out what sources they're citing, reach out to those publishers and say, hey, you might want to add to your article this paragraph, or I'd love to be interviewed so that your article reference can be more comprehensive in the types of answer that you're providing. And it is all, I also saw, and maybe this was just true with SEO, maybe nothing about this is new, but I saw people publishing like vendor comparison sites for their own category on their own website. And then saying, well, how does, the place I saw this was Sales Enablement Training, and Chris Orlob has a page about P Club, this, sales training company that he runs. And it's like, who are the best sales enablement, who are the best sales training companies online? And then he has a list of his own company. Why is P Club better than other sales training companies? Is that what we should be doing, Rahul?
I think in this moment in time, that's performing really well. So I think a lot of these citations, and everybody can do this for their own company, is like, look at the category and what your prospects are likely searching. So essentially, like if you're, what is the best CRM out there? Like what is the best kind of category level search? See what the sources are that Google is returning in their AI overview, what ChatGPT and Perplexity are returning, and then design similar pages to that. So right now, these top 10 listicles are getting cited very, very often. And so if you're a brand and you're in that category, you need to show up in those listicles. And even if it's a competitor listicle, what Noble is doing for our clients is that we will reach out, we'll essentially run these search queries, we'll see the sources that these LLMs are citing. If that brand is not included in that source, we'll actually reach out to the author or publisher to get them mentioned in that source. Right now, it's working really well. We have seen that once you get mentioned in that source, you now show up in the answer, whereas before you weren't. We'll be releasing more case studies kind of showing the overall increase in visibility in the LLMs as you get mentioned in more of these sources getting cited. But I think in this moment in time, that is working really well. Will the sources change from like these top 10 listicles to other types of like editorial content? They probably will over time, but At the end of the day, it's a matter of just getting mentioned in those sources that's driving the visibility. And I know like Ahrefs has a lot of the research on this as well. And what they've said is like the number one factor in showing up in these LLMs is actually just getting mentioned in the sources that these LLMs
so
are.
sad that, one thing that would have been beautiful would have been that the limitations of the previous era's technology, which led to whatever version of SEO we had and its pros and cons, that in this new world, things were a little bit more stylish and finessed, but it's kind of like these odd websites and listicles and companies doing competitor analysis on their own for themselves against their competitors. But obviously somebody's going to be like, we looked at the competitive landscape and we are the worst, actually. We have a lot of soul searching to do. We'll be back. Sorry, go to these guys instead. No one's going to do that, but it seems to work, and it seems to be the thing that's actually happening in this new era as well, which is just a sad thing. It's just an observation. Just to to take another look at this from a different angle. Ethan, we're all wondering, we know how to do SEO to some extent. And there's this new thing. How much is it working? What type of volume is it driving? Hence, what type of resources should we allocate towards it? Or questions we're all thinking about. Can you give us a view on, you shared earlier how many searches there are on Google per month today? How does that compare to AEO driven traffic? Like, how would you compare these two things right now?
Yeah, so I have a lot of data on this. So I think, let's see here. Google search, for example, has 5 times as many visitors as all the LLMs combined, more or less. And I'm seeing a roughly similar breakdown of conversions. So a common conversion amount from Webflow and Vercel is 8% of signups come from LLMs. I've heard that from others. It depends on the category. Early adopter, if your ICP is an early adopter, you're probably going to get more from LLMs versus something where it's not an early adopter. But that's the rough ratio that I see, is roughly 5x search versus LLMs. And then, but it's growing. So that's why we're talking about this. Is not the absolute amount, but the slope. The slope is steep. So
what's the slope like? Like, where was this maybe a year ago? Where are we today? Where do you think we'll be? Like, at what point do you think it'll be a 50-50? Half the traffic is going through Google, half the traffic is going through AI.
Yeah, so 2025 versus 2024, ChatGPT and the others are up double. So ChatGPT is up 2x, and Gemini is up 125%. Perplexity is up 82%. So the LLMs have roughly doubled in 1 year, and now they're 1/5 the size of search. Search is staying flat. So like, when does the 1/5 become 1-to-1? It's probably an S curve, or it's certainly an S curve. And when does it reach 50-50? I would say probably like 3 to 5 years, not 12 months. So that's my rough guess. And then your question was, well, how should I think about staffing this and resourcing this? And how I would think about this is it's another search channel. And I would say 2/3 of SEO work for free in AEO. The stuff that's different is the one thing that's different is the offsite and the long tail. And so I would just keep doing SEO, and then I would add offsite. And offsite's basically an evolution of link building. So to build links, you could pay people, you could do viral PR, you could do social media, like all this stuff work for backlinks. It's not exactly the same for offsite AEO, but it's similar. And so I basically build out, either I'd work with Rahul or I would build it internally to do offsite optimization. So Reddit, YouTube, affiliates, viral content, LinkedIn, Instagram, TikTok, all of these things are sources for offsite. So I would continue to do SEO. I would potentially increase SEO because it's growing, or the LLM part is growing, is incremental, and then I would add offsite.
I just feel like I'd heard from certain marketers earlier in the year, like SEO is dead. Agents, LLMs are going to replace everything, but they didn't. I don't know that when they said that they knew what they were talking about, because agents would have to search the web just like humans would have to search the web. So I just feel like what I'm hearing is everything is keep doing more of the same. Even what you said, Ethan, which is, there was like snippets were 20% and, summaries and AI answers on Google were 27%. So yeah, that's like a meaningful increase on that base of 20%. But the reality is it's still 3 out of 4 searches are not presented with an AI summary, and there are blue links that you can click, and all of the stuff, we might call it offsite, but it's still basic muscles that we built over the last 25 years, figuring out how to get people to go to your website and have it generate authority. So it just feels like anybody that was saying SEO is dead is a complete moron.
Here's what I would say. I mentioned programmatic SEO and editorial SEO, and they're very different, but they're still SEO. So programmatic SEO is gathering millions of search keywords and like, how do you, like, I used to scrape Yahoo's autocomplete with multiple threads of like blasting their autocomplete and then putting in a database, grouping the keywords. Like, that's very different from editorial SEO. Editorial SEO is keyword grouping, coming up with content briefs, working with writers. Totally different from programmatic SEO, but they're both SEO. And so for AEO, it's still, it's maybe even less of a change from programmatic to editorial as AEO to editorial. There's a difference, but it's the offsite difference, and it's the long tail. Now, to your point about you've been hearing that SEO is dead, there's a reason why you've been hearing that. And it's more interesting and more memorable to say something is different than that's not different. If I told you everything's kind of the same, you wouldn't go to a cocktail party and say, yeah, by the way, I heard that everything's the same. You would say, I heard something is really different. And then that person would tell somebody else that they heard stuff is really different, like traffic. So what do you hear? You hear that traffic is people are not using Google, which is not true. They're using ChatGPT instead of Google. Not true. Number one. Number two is AI overviews is killing click-through rate. Not really true. Reducing it, but not really killing it. You're hearing that other sites are going way down. Also mostly not true. And then you're hearing that the strategies for AEO and SEO are completely different, which is also not true. But these are all more interesting, clickable, remarkable things to say. And so if 10 people tell you, like if 5 of the 10 tell you everything's not the same, or sorry, everything's the same and flat, 5 people tell you that's different, you're going to remember the ones that about it different, and you're going to mention it to other people. And then those people are going to mention it to other people. And now you're hearing all of these people saying, I heard a consistent theme among these people that AEO, or, SEO is dead and AEO is totally different and traffic's down. And that is now the prevailing wisdom, because not because it's true and not because people lack intelligence, but because it's more interesting. It's because of psychology and how myths spread.
Do you think there's cohorts that are different, that are behaving different? Because I have heard from B2B marketers that they feel like traffic is down. And, they're looking at Google Analytics. They're not, it's not a cocktail party conversation. They feel like traffic is down and they're trying to attribute a reason why. Might there be a difference between B2C versus B2B, or do you think everybody's just overreacting?
I think that if your traffic goes down, let's say that your traffic, like HubSpot's a good example. HubSpot's traffic went down. There was an algorithm change. It's clear that there was an algorithm change. It wasn't like a slow, steady thing. It was a discrete jump, which is what happens when algorithms change. And so if you're trying to make sense out of that, it's challenging to say, well, Google just sort of made a change and I don't know why. Like, that's not a great answer. And that's my general observation, which is some sites go up, some sites go down. It's roughly zero sum. And so if your site goes down and you don't know why, you didn't do anything, then it would logically follow that the traffic must be down. But actually what's happening regularly is Google's reconfiguring their search algorithm. People go up and down. They may not even be correct. Like, you didn't do anything wrong. Your content's great. Your traffic went down. That happens all the time. And usually it's just because Google recalibrated their algorithm, but that's not a very good answer. And so the answer that would make more sense, which is probably not true, is traffic's going down. Now, are there categories that have gone down more than others? Probably. There's like that, the more informational, like what's the weather? It's probably going down. Something like, I want to buy a payroll management software. I don't think that that's going down.
Well, is it traffic going down or conversions going down? The thing that you just brought up about HubSpot is really, really interesting. At inbound, and Rahul can say this as well, the whole messaging was around inbound marketing is dead. Literally, that was the messaging. And it's like, to the point of change, like, oh my goodness, everything's fire, 5-alarm fire. And what's happened since? Well, HubSpot's stock is down 50% in the last 6 weeks. And I think a lot of it is because it's self-fulfilling circle that they've caused this, oh my God, everything's changed without giving clarity to the thing that you're giving clarity to is like, no. It's not change. You just have to understand your channels better, more than ever. And traffic, what we've seen in our own metrics is that actually traffic's gone up across all channels, but conversions have actually gone down. And that's the area like where we've thought about this. And Rahul, I'd just be interested in your take on this with you being an inbound and HubSpot having this messaging and just this idea of change and SEO is dead. What did you take away from inbound and as it relates to SEO and what you're seeing?
Yeah, specific to SEO, I think it's evolving. I think Ethan kind of nailed it as far as like the core principles of SEO are still there, but then there's these added elements of like offsite that are really important that probably weren't as important in the SEO days. I do think from a lot of the customers that we're talking to, they are seeing a significant decrease in their website traffic from Google, but they are seeing an increase in conversion rate when people do land on their site from these LLMs. Ethan, I know you have a phenomenal case study from Webflow that you can kind of talk through in terms of what they were seeing. But I think in general, I think this is like in the very early days of this. I think we're going to see website traffic on the whole decrease, where it's like humans visiting websites will decrease, because I do think that these LLMs, whether it's Google or ChatGPT or Perplexity, they now have a huge incentive to keep users on the LLM to get more information. And I think at some point, I mean, ChatGPT has already announced this, there'll be a checkout directly on the LLM. And so I think the future of search will be an experience where like, yes, people will always visit websites to a certain extent, but I think that human traffic is going to decrease significantly. And I think the LLMs are going to adjust their business model where you have the initial search on the LLM, all the follow-up searches are there. And once you have the information you need, you can either check out directly or book a demo from the LLM. And there'll be agents that orchestrate that. So like, the traffic to the website will still be there, but it'll be bots that are coordinating that on behalf of a human that's on the LLM actually interacting with it. So that's where I see this generally going. But to the overall kind of narrative, I think traffic is decreasing, but I think the LLMs have no incentive to give traffic back to websites because they don't need to. And if they can now make a percent of the transaction by facilitating it or making money off of the booking and demo, I think that's a new revenue stream for them in addition to just ads on the LLM or search engine.
Ethan, prior to this AI wave, I'd never heard of you or your company. Maybe you were really popular in San Francisco and in the Valley, and I was just an idiot, but I hadn't heard of you. And then post AI, I've heard of you a ton. I've watched your podcast with Lenny, which is great. It was very informative, actually. And we've seen you around a lot. And so you've kind of become the guy. And we've shared some of the names of companies that you're working with, but then there are companies that we can't mention, and it's a staggering client list. And so I'm curious how you became the guy. Like if you were to do a look back, what's worked with you to brand yourself at the top of this new thing that's happening, so that if anyone is serious about AEO today in tech, you are one of the conversations they're having and the person that they want to work with most. Like, how did you do this? Because one of the conversations we're having is channels don't work and don't try to grow on Twitter now. It's so saturated and don't do this. It's so hard. And then you kind of popped out and you're the guy. So
also, isn't Asa the best at backhanded compliments? I've never heard of you until a month ago.
It's true. But I've heard of them a ton since then. And so something
Nobody's
worked.
heard of us still. Not even the people listening to the podcast don't
Bring
know who he is.
compliment.
Thank you for the kind words. Yeah. So we basically, ironically, we're a marketing agency who specialize in SEO and AEO and content. And we ironically never did marketing for ourselves. So everything was referral based. I would maybe do a tiny bit of speaking. I didn't really post on LinkedIn at all. And then I thought, well, given that we're a marketing company, we should probably do marketing. And an interesting thing, I tried to delegate writing because, we have a content agency, so we should be able to delegate writing. And what I found is that we cannot delegate novel writing. I cannot delegate writing of new ideas to other people. I have to write it down myself. And it's hard to write 50 pages while you're running a company. And and you essentially cannot do it during the week. So what I found is that the only way I can write content is to do it on weekends. And so I basically spent a series of weekends writing down my ideas and then doing LinkedIn marketing and webinars like this. And LinkedIn marketing so basically the recipe is
call us
Ethan
a webinar.
spends
That's very offensive. You're
Yes.
getting back at me for that backhanded
Yes.
compliment.
Here's the recipe to blow up, which is spend, number one, actually analyze the new channel and like figure out what works. So that's step one. Step two is spend your weekends writing down your ideas rather than spending time with your friends and your family. It may or may not make sense for everyone, but that's what I did. Step three is build your audience on Reddit, LinkedIn, X. I've only built it on LinkedIn. I haven't really built it anywhere else. And then the fourth is do webinars like this. But the number one feedback that I get from webinars like this is to give
We're
very
a podcast,
specific.
Stephen. We're not a webinar. We will never
sorry.
be a webinar.
Oh, he
Sorry,
knows.
sorry.
He only
I
mentioned
mean-
it 4 times just now.
What
will
I mean is
correct it each
recording
time.
videos. Recording videos. So like I did a Reforge webinar. I did a Lenny podcast. This is a podcast. Other webinars.
There
They're
you
all
go.
just video. To me, from a marketing perspective, they're all just videos of thought leadership that I can distribute, and I distribute them on LinkedIn as my main channel, and then our email list. So that's basically how we blew up. Is we never did marketing, and now we've done marketing. We did it in a unique way. It's novel thought leadership on a newest channel, which is LinkedIn.
It seems like if you're doing something interesting, like if you can be informative against things people are curious about and your stuff is interesting / entertaining, no channel is too saturated. I was looking at people on Twitter or X that have gone from nothing to like 20, 30, 50,000 subscribers or followers in the last couple of years. And there's just, it's a huge list of people. And 2 or 3 years ago, people would say it's too hard focus on LinkedIn. There's more alpha on LinkedIn. So I think a lot of this conversation around channels, etc., comes down to other things. It's not these channels.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think it's partially, yes, like everything is saturated, but there's always a way to break through. And if your content is interesting enough, if it stands out, if it's not just AI generated slop, I think you're going to be much more likely to break through.
Yeah, I also kind of disagree with the general premise that anything is ever saturated. I think that there's always opportunities to optimize. So I just sort of generally reject that premise. And I would say the channels are changing, but long as like television works. You mentioned sending people paper mail, like that. Those things work. I think that you just need to spend the time to try to make them work. But I just generally reject the premise that anything is saturated. Really.
I agree with you. Asad always makes the point that the restaurant industry is saturated. Do we ever need a new restaurant? Technically, everybody's getting all the food that they need. So, and yet people start new restaurants all the time, and great new restaurants break through. People like novelty, they like new voices, and they like interesting, thoughtful takes. And with that, this has been another great episode of Topline. Asad, do you have a closing question for any of us?
Something, I like to ask this question often. It's not because I've forgotten we've asked it. It's just an interesting thing to talk about. Something that important that you've changed your mind about this year could be personal, it could be professional, it could be something outside of that realm. And AJ, we're going to start with you because you feel very prepared for this question.
What? How do I feel prepared?
Just
The only thing I'm
look in
prepared
your
to
eyes.
say.
You just got to look.
The only thing I'm prepared to say is that I was the only one to get a question right at the very beginning of this, and no one called that out. And I'm a little disappointed, Austin, that wasn't called out. Okay, let me answer your question. One thing that I have changed in my mind since the beginning of the year. I actually do have one. Which the last time you asked this question was really around travel, or what did you change? Like if you look back 5 years, what would you be surprised about yourself? And I said travel. And I'm actually going to go a step further and say that I want to spend the next 6 months until maybe the beginning of the year not traveling at all. And
Wow.
I don't think it's going to be entirely possible, but I am just so over travel. I did 3 cities last week in 4 days, and it's just not fun anymore. And so that's a really important thing, and I've got to figure out how to change that. And it's something I'm still processing and figuring out, but it's a really important Yeah, it's really important.
A
So
motivation for you. I run an 8-figure revenue business, and I have not met any of our top 30 customers in person ever.
No, the way you do it, Asit, is you're like, I'm going to show up. And then the next day you're like, actually, I can't make it. I just can't make it. So
yeah,
the way you've optimized your travel is, I want to be awesome.
This is a real interaction.
Yes.
Rahul.
I would say there's professional and personal. Professional, and Sam knows this, we started Noble by focusing on word of mouth recommendations. And the thesis was like, the market is so saturated. People are just turning to their friends for recommendations. Like, this is going to be the next way people like make product purchases. And when these LLMs took off, it was clear to me and my co-founder, Josh, that these LLMs are your quote unquote friend. When you reach out for advice, for recommendations, like you'll be reaching out to these LLMs before you probably ask your friends for recommendations, but it'll probably be a little bit of both. But I was really surprised just how good these LLMs are at making you like trust them, even during the hallucinations. Like I always felt like they got past that phase of like, this isn't actually working that well, but people still use them. And for me, just like professionally being able to lean into that. So that's one thing I changed my mind on, is essentially just like the power of these LLMs, and it actually probably being more powerful than word of mouth in terms of how people buy. The second
That's
thing,
a really interesting take. That's really interesting, because we always think word of mouth is like the biggest.
Yeah, it's the persuasiveness of the LLM. They sound so authoritative.
yeah, and they can be completely wrong, but you still trust it, which is.
You also talk about like your mental health stuff with it in the evening, and then in the daytime you're asking about CAC to LTV. It's a very odd relationship. You don't do that with your psychologist, and so then you have this like strange relationship with it, and then it tells you things, you believe it. Very interesting. That was really good, bro.
I think the big insight I had there is like when I see my wife interact with ChatGPT, like she turns to it for like everything. Like, how do I respond to this email? How do I respond to this text message? And like when I see her using it, I'm like, okay, this is like going to be mainstream, because she trusts it inherently, and it's really powerful to see.
Interesting. Ethan, what have you changed your mind about?
Couple things. So the first thing is, I actually did not expect AEO and LLMs to blow up as fast as they did, and I predicted that the growth would be slower. So like I got started in AEO in June, and I said, it's very interesting. You might invest in it. I'm not really sure. I don't know how fast it's going to grow. So it actually grew faster than I expected, despite being in the field myself. And then the second thing is, now that I've been doing writing, I've been surprised by the level of thoughtfulness of major media, and like fact checking and asking to see the data, and like very thoughtful. So I had a lower expectation of the level of rigor and thoughtfulness of the media. And then interestingly, the social media, I have seen a much significantly less thoughtfulness. Like we did an Axios article about AI content reaching human content, and a large majority of the comments are people who never read the article. Clearly, like they basically say that you can't detect AI, when we have half the article about evaluating AI detection. So I was surprised and changed my mind about major media is actually very thoughtful, and then social media is less thoughtful than I thought.
That's very interesting. I always find that the character limit restrictions minimize the depth a person can go into, and then there's some other like algorithmic issues, and you end up just getting these like kind of surface level, sometimes useful, most of the time not very useful tidbits on social media, whereas like longer form, if done well, has just more depth to it. Sam, these have been great.
They've been pretty good. I don't have a comment about AI. What I will say is, my rule of business for a while was exceptions will be made. And that I've changed my mind about that. And I think exceptions are very, very bad. And I wrote about this on LinkedIn, but this Clay Christian thing about 100% is way easier than 98%. And he gives an example, but the point is, once you start making exceptions, then everything becomes a question in terms of decision making. And if you just say there are no exceptions to this rule, I just do this, it frees you up to make other decisions, as opposed to having to have an existential crisis on your ICP. Should we sell to this person or that person because this person's offering us money? And I think the more focus you can have, the better your results will be from a strategic perspective. And I'm really trying to make fewer exceptions across the organization right now. And I think you'll see that play out with Pavilion over the next couple of months and years.
Ooh, I like that
one. I really like that one.
That's very interesting. Mine is on sleep. I have the worst sleep, and so I'm always trying things. I'm trying to stay away from like the hardcore stuff, and so I wrestle with take a deep breath and read a book and do all of these weird things. And something I was taking was melatonin, which is like, I don't want to take the pharmaceutical stuff. My mom's like, take this, it'll help. And I'd been taking it for a long time. And I recently stopped for a while just because I didn't have it on me. And I noticed falling asleep was a bit harder, but I woke up quite clear-headed. I didn't realize how foggy I was every morning with it. And so I've changed my mind on its place in my life. I don't want to have as much of it anymore. And I think it's helping.
Well, it's been another great episode of Topline. Ethan,
Webinar, Sam.
Thank you.
Webinar.
Right, exactly. Thanks for coming to our webinar. We're going to send you a bunch of emails to buy our solution as soon as you hang. And we've sold all of your email addresses to a number of third parties. Thanks for listening. Smash the subscribe button and give us 5 stars wherever you get your podcast. Thanks, Rahul and Ethan. Thanks for being such great guests. We appreciate it.
Thank you, everyone.
Yes.